Thanks everyone for coming out today. This is really fun for us. So I'll kind of kick things off, and Shareil is like Daniel said, he's our head of customer success, customer experience at Arrow, so he's going to be running a lot of this. But as Daniel mentioned, we just started a kind of new webinar series called Onboarding Therapy, where we kind of talk about customer onboarding and customer success in general with different guests. And so this is kind of like a live, in real life version, so we're excited to do that today. So as Daniel said, I ran a customer onboarding team at my previous job. I was a Series A kind of startup, and Shareil, I'll let him give his big intro, but he's been at a lot bigger companies running customer success and kind of building up onboarding there. So has a lot of thoughts on kind of how to make that all work and make customer success kind of successful internally at companies.
Yeah, hi, welcome, first of all, thank you for coming. I was just joking with Alice and a couple others about how I've been doing this well before onboarding was cool. So I don't know if it's cool yet. But the fact that you're all here indicates that it's somewhat cool and people care enough. But no, I've been in this space for a while. Me and Kim have both been at Arrows for about 4 years now, which feels meta at times because we're talking to a lot of our customers about their onboarding and their processes. And selfishly, we get to learn a ton, which is kind of where onboarding therapy stemmed from too. We would get folks like you all, folks like ourselves coming and essentially just venting about what is or isn't going really well in sales and in marketing and in handoffs to success. So we're like, there's probably something here we can build on and actually start to educate folks, because we also, again, selfishly get to learn so much from what you all are doing. But before Arrows, I was at Sprout Social, like Kim mentioned, running their onboarding and lifecycle programs, which really just meant retention. It was advertised as we have a churn problem at day 30 and day 60. And what you really have is an internal handoff problem and a communication problem and a sales to success challenge and all the bits that you all especially focus on and look to solving. And then before that, I was at a crappy 6-month job that I quit without a job lined up because I didn't focus on onboarding. But before that, I was at Booking.com for about 6 years, also scaling and managing their onboarding teams here in North America. So we like to share all that just to say, even Arrows, the product aside, if you all ever just want to chat the space of onboarding or strategy or success, that's where we geek out the most. So thanks for coming.
Yeah. So you all have a book in front of you called The Expansion Sale. That is actually one that Jan recommended, and I was listening to it on the way up. It's super good, and it's got a lot of really tactical, these are the kind of conversations you should be having in customer success with your customers, kind of the positioning of that. So that's a really great how to actually communicate with your customers, and Jan might get into that a little bit more too. But a big thing that Shareil and I notice in our talks about customer onboarding or with our own customers is we always kind of try to have the customer or the conversation go around what is the customer's experience. And what we always come back to is you can't build a good customer experience without good internal alignment, especially around customer success. And I think it's a really big blocker for a lot of companies. A lot of companies are really prioritizing or thinking about sales and marketing and product all the time. And customer success is kind of like a siloed team that doesn't have a lot of communication or alignment or resources. So I think that's what we really want to talk about a lot. Shareil did that and built that out at Sprout. So would love to kind of kick off with kind of how you identified that as the need and the thing that you needed to do to kind of take things further at Sprout.
Yeah. I think it's easy and fair to say often these teams are viewed as cost centers because they're expensive employees. We don't often generate or drive revenue, especially in those early life cycle moments. And that was the initial thing that I recognized at Sprout. It was a reactive motion. We would market the crap out of people and sell them on this vision and dream, and then it was cool, good luck, figure it out over there in onboarding, right? And that's a really bad customer experience. That's where the drop off happens. That's why they had a day 30 and a day 60 churn problem, because you were bringing on 1,000+ subscriptions a month, and 5% of them are getting some degree of handoff and onboarding and support, right? And a lot of that, and I started digging deeper and deeper, a lot of it was people weren't talking internally. So these problems existed in silos at a pretty well-established and successful company. It was pre-IPO at the time I was there, but on their path to going IPO and making a lot of money, and still had those internal frictions. And that was the biggest highlight in my observation of it all, was everyone knew there was a problem, but no one was actually talking about it. And so what we ended up, this was a few years in, what ended up morphing out of these conversations was, so my role was a senior program manager overseeing the onboarding team and overseeing the implementation process. But really my role morphed into, we called it an onboarding guild, call it what you want internally, but it was a cross departmental functioning group that actually interacted together and met together. And so what that meant on actual paper was I had directors of every department basically once every 2 weeks getting in a room together and asking what challenges are we all facing when it comes to churn. What challenges are we all facing when it actually comes to churn, and how do we collectively solve them together? So, and again, that often stemmed from like, no, we would sell a customer, but then not have any good handoff notes or not really know what to do with that customer. And it seems silly, but now if you're asking a question again, that's ruining the customer experience. And it got to a point where customers would tell us, I've answered this to your sales team. Don't you have notes in your CRM? That's embarrassing for a company of any of our sizes, right? And there just wasn't that internal collaboration or the internal handoff. So we really started there. The Onboarding Guild ended up morphing into this cross-functional group of leaders from every department. And the focus was onboarding goals. But we approached it from like a collective group. So like one example was product launched a new feature. We all got into a room together, and I'll use a very specific example. Sprout Social is social media management. So you're uploading your posts and scheduling posts to go out across different profiles and networks, right? And the biggest value, or one of the biggest values, was analytics. So we had premium analytics suites that let you then measure what you would normally take an hour across each Facebook profile and Twitter profile and Instagram, all condensed into one. And so people were running these huge reports. But you have thousands of pieces of content in there, and each of those have metrics and performance metrics that you're trying to gauge. So one very basic feature was tags. You could label tags or content with different tags, and it was very, very small. But after working with data science, we saw that the propensity to churn drastically decreased as you used more and more and more tags in your account. And it made sense. It was a time investment. You have to spend a lot of time categorizing your content, tagging it with content. So then migrating that to a different system would be a nightmare. So the more tags you use, the more likely you were to stick around. We all got in this room and we're like, how do we drive this thing now? So product built in-app tours around tags. Marketing started talking about tags inside of a campaign. Sales mentioned tags. And this was stuff we never talked about because it was such in the weeds of the feature, right? Marketing started talking about tags. Sales started talking about tags. In onboarding, we started actually showing tags and how to use them and how to apply them. And then a few months later, we saw premium analytics sales skyrocket because people were like, the value is this actual tag. But it was that collective effort that got buy-in from all then our leaders and executive leaders too. We had executive sponsors. Our CRO and CMO were very involved in the guild, and they would meet with us once a month. But once we could prove, and this is how onboarding eventually got a seat at the table, as I like to say, we were able to prove there is some value here. We can work cross collaboratively with everybody, and we're actually driving now business metrics because we can look back and say it was because of these conversations that this customer ended up using this specific feature and then in turn ended up growing and actually expanding their revenue with us, right? And Jan's going to talk about data as well, and it's obviously a big one. But we then had the data to prove that. We could say we had this many conversations. We actually created X number of deals in Salesforce or in HubSpot, and those turned into XYZ dollars when it was all said and done. So just one kind of example jumping into that.
And I think it's an example of, I think a lot of teams would see that you need the analytics tags or whatever it is and say, okay, onboarding and customer success, you need to talk about this with customers. But it's a really good example of like, that's a small part of what people see. And if you can get multiple teams aligned on that, the power is so much bigger. So you're only going to get certain results by having onboarding and customer success talking about those kind of new features or things that you want to highlight or upsells or whatever that is. But having that full company alignment is so critical and really just expands kind of the opportunity that's there. The one thing I was going to mention too, I think everyone's at different kind of stage companies. I think the ideal is we're seeing a lot more trends to having like customer marketing or customer success ops, that kind of dedicated roles to help customer success teams. But even if you're not at a team like that and you just have customer success, maybe even a few kind of onboarding or customer success team members, I think getting those team members involved in something like a customer guild or an onboarding guild and saying like, can we get one day of your time a month to kind of focus or kind of help us kind of align, even if they're not actually contributing work to it, but aligning around understanding what our customers are going through, what our customers are struggling with in onboarding. Those are valuable insights that they're only going to get from the onboarding and customer success teams. And I think there's a lot of like, there's a lot more internal advocating that customer success and onboarding teams just have to do in order to get those conversations and allow those conversations to happen at companies.
Yeah. And one, I think, extra kind of cherry on top was ultimately this is a big feedback loop, right? And now you're getting feedback in real time from all these departments talking about it. But it was less finger pointing, which tends to happen when you're not aligned. It's easy to say sales missold this, or marketing mismarketed this, or onboarding fumbled the ball and didn't actually talk about all the things in those 6 calls we scheduled. But it made it this like proactive and like valuable feedback loop internally, where then we could quickly say, actually, we have video of this with a customer recording now. This is why that tag didn't work. So product was instantly getting feedback, and most engineers love building software that works and features that work, right? They want to see their stuff being used. So then I could quickly go and say, all right, here is what didn't work about the feature. This is a UI challenge or a design problem. Or again, not to point fingers, but this segment of a sales team is setting expectations incorrectly on this feature, or they don't need this feature at their level of sale. Stop talking about it with this segment, right? Same with support. Support is a great source, especially support tickets if you're tracking them. That's a great source of things you should be doing proactively. Because if the same question is coming up in support, answer it in onboarding. If the same question is coming up in onboarding, answer it in sales. If the same challenges are coming up there, answer it in marketing, right? But without that alignment, it's really hard to know where those people are stuck. And then we continue to work in more and more silos, which is frustrating, and it doesn't drive the business forward. And now those teams really are cost centers, and they are sitting there working without alignment, without a seat at the table. And I do think it's on onboarding and CS leaders to prove that value and to own that value and to demonstrate that value. But getting that seat is hard if you aren't starting somewhere or starting with that.
I think maybe last kind of point to wrap this conversation up, and then we can all chat through it. But you were lucky and had quite good buy-in from your executive team at that last role. But what would you say for someone who maybe doesn't have that buy-in yet, or is trying to kind of get leadership or other teams to see the value and kind of what's possible with customer success and onboarding?
Yeah, for sure. Great. I mean, unbeknownst to me, Sprout was gearing up for an IPO and we had a churn problem. So of course they had to solve for that. So yeah, my CEO was very bought into solving churn. So I walked in and was like, yeah, this is great. I'm the best onboarding rep ever. But no, part of that was obviously having that buy-in. But without that buy-in, again, you have to demonstrate the value and try to prove that there is something there, plus start small. I think what I just talked about in 10 minutes was a 4-year project. So you're not going to jump in and all of a sudden get everyone's buy-in and get everyone on board and get everyone excited about it. Probably the opposite initially, because you're going to be sharing a lot of feedback that other departments might not want to hear or might not want to address. So start small, find one little thing that's working. We all talk about health scores and how healthy customers are. Find what caused a few customers to churn and work backwards from that and undo those things, and then go and share that value and actually put together a plan of, okay, let's try this again with 10 more reps, or let's try it again with this feature specifically. So like that tags bit, we ran a month campaign and we knew it was going to be expensive in human time and in effort from across all these departments. So that was set a timeline to it, said, can we get X% of customers to adopt this? If yes, cool. What does that revenue impact look like? And then being able to go back and share some of those results. And whether it gets adopted or not, that's the part that I think you can start with, which is finding something, testing it, sharing results. And then once you have a little bit more traction, go a little bit further, go a little bit further, go a little bit further. So don't try to change it all overnight.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we could break it into like this week, meet with someone on the sales team or someone on the support team or someone that could be an advocate or like a way in. That's like the kind of near-term plan to kind of start building that guild. 1 month, maybe set a meeting for a few different teams to kind of have that discussion, and then set like kind of those more incremental goals to build it up and kind of build that trust over time.
Yeah, starting with that one or two people champion is ideal.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be sitting in talent reviews and also seeing who is wanting to move up and who is wanting to get better in their career. So I would pinpoint those folks and say, you want to try this project? We're trying to launch this thing or work on this thing together. It could help your career in these ways or your promotion in these ways. So finding a few of those internal champions also goes a long way.
Well, anything else?
That was fast. We were supposed to do this in 45 minutes, so we condensed it to 15.
You can open it up for questions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many of you are having challenges with this exact issue right now? Very few? Couple? There's like some head nods, sort of. Yeah. What kind of challenges are you having that maybe we can answer here, or just kind of have a brainstorm amongst each other?
sort of just on like a human wants and needs level, did you find yourselves thinking about what incentives to provide to what team that is all aligned around onboarding? So it's like, at least in my experience, it was difficult to get people to care about what the other team is doing. Mm-hmm. Sure, like you want them to as a leader, but ultimately you have to build an incentive for the techs or the engineers to want to help the onboarding team with doing this. So how do y'all think about that? In the least gauche way.
Yeah, great question. I think we had I call it a vanity goal of onboarding 100% of our customers, which I don't think is actually possible. But having a pathway to getting an option for all those customers to have some degree of onboarding or activation or whatever it was. And really the driving factor was that churn. So we had a churn problem, and it was about a 70% drop off of new subscriptions with churn between the first 60 days, which is a lot when you're bringing on 1,000 subscriptions a month. And so it was easy to tie it back to revenue and say, this is how many dollars we can potentially save, which, if true, can help our departments and help us grow and get the funding and resources that we need to keep going. But you have to have some degree of aligned goal, and that aligned goal has to be a business KPI or OKR or something at that level.
Speak to that. When you say you had a vanity goal of 100% onboarding, did you just follow that up at 1,000 new customers along? Is that why? So did you have sort of like a consumer, like was it a large number of things coming on board, and so it was going to expect it to be some drop off, like
Yeah.
Because usually, like if you have 100 customers and you have 10 people coming on board a month, like you better onboard all 10, right? So I was just so curious.
Yeah, great question. Part of it was the model. So Sprout Social was selling very high-end packages and $99 self-serve guided type of starter kits. So a lot of that churn was coming from those self-starter, self-selecting folks. And when paid attention to, a lot of growth opportunity was also living in that bucket. So we built a model where we expected a lot of that churn to happen, and we relied on things like better product tours and better design and better intuitive nature of software to fix it. And the reality was it just wasn't fixing it fast enough or catching up with that churn rate.
I can add one thing to your earlier question. I specifically have experience collaborating more with sales teams. When I was running an onboarding team, it stemmed from sales. So sales was initially doing onboarding. We needed to have sales focus on sales and not do onboarding, so I started up an onboarding program. And a big problem that we had is sales teams would give discounts at the end of the month to try to close enough business, and then the customers would churn, or they would maybe have like a 3-month trial and then they would never actually pay us, but we'd been onboarding them for 3 months. So one thing that was hard to implement, but the sales team actually ended up being on board with this, was we paid out a certain percentage of their commission after the customer actually paid. So like you have to be a paying customer. You also have to be a customer for 3 months or whatever it ended up being. And I worked really, really closely with sales to set that up so that it felt like a win for them too. I think that was really critical, where it felt like a partnership where like, everyone's mad at you because you're giving these discounts. They're not actually paying us. We're wasting resources. So like, let's kind of figure this out together. And I think that comes back to like the kind of guild setup or the kind of internal collaboration where it's like, I want you to succeed too. I'm not trying to make your life harder. So let's make this work so that you're still getting some percentage of commission, but also it makes sense for the business. And I think that's a big thing too. It's like, it's not about onboarding. It's not about sales. It's about the business health. And so tying it back to that and how the teams can work together is really important.
I think this is a really important conversation to have, though, because we're seeing this. I've talked to many of you today about customer success being kind of relegated to like, oh, we need to cost cut, go cut that team, which seems insane for all of us in this room. But how have any of you kind of gotten that executive alignment all the way down to say, like, there is value in CX and we do need to invest in it, and here's why? Are there any success stories that we can share from the crowd? Because I think that's something that we all share as a common challenge.
I can.
Can I just
please.
that for a second?
Yeah,
because the reason why, because I've led whole webinars on this, and I actually have a course on this and things like that. The reason why CSLC or onboarding fee as a cost center is because in the profit and loss statement, it is a cost center.
Right.
It is cost of goods sold, right? I mean, it just is. That's where it lives. If you look at the revenue minus costs, that's how you get gross profit. COGS takes away from the profit. And so if you have less revenue coming in, which many companies did all of a sudden, right, when all of the tech economy changed, I mean, basically what happened was that's all, and all of the investors wanted it to go to profitability, they had to cut costs. They had to. If they needed to show some sort of profitability, and investors were looking at revenue minus cost equals profitability, boom, you cut it. So there's a lot of ways in which we need to be more efficient across the board. But it's because of where we sit in the profit and loss statement that we're seeing that way. But clearly, just as what you were talking about, that doesn't mean that we have to be reactive and that we're not all contributing to revenue and that we're not all contributing to what the customer needs, which is business value, right?
And to build on that, Jan, as
Yeah.
CEO who's looking at the balance sheet every month and profit and loss, like we've had that exact conversation. Like, there's no world I can't move. This is literally what it is from an accounting basis.
Yeah.
Success and like you're a cost of delivering the service.
Yeah.
How does that? And I think broadly, we service a lot of customer success and onboarding teams, and a lot of them in the industry and our customers don't necessarily reconcile with that fact and approach their communication with the org with that fact, and then say, yes, we're at this cost, but here's what we're doing to contribute to the business in this way.
There's a couple hands.
Yeah,
Would you like to?
I may be able to share a success story from my organization. We're in a little bit of a unique customer success experience in the sense that we have a free SaaS platform company that I work for. So when the customer installs, they haven't brought us a dollar in revenue yet. So the customer experience is really important because we are enabling them to use the platform to then generate revenue for the organization. So in my experience, we've had a lot of buy-in from investors, from leadership, because they really want us to make sure the customer knows how to use the platform and continues to use the platform, so there isn't any dollars not being taken. And we've been able to kind of do a lot of our outreach via HubSpot. It's really enabled us to do that and automate things of that sort. But I would say there are key points, though, still, of course, that I think some others may have. Is you get ghosted. If you're not paying for something, you forget about it sometimes. And so it can be a good thing if you've gotten them to turn on automation because they just forget they're using you and paying for you. But if they haven't done that, and then that's what I tell people, don't talk to them more than you need to. Like, let them, forget. But they're it's horrible of me to admit, but it's true.
Hey, this is a safe space.
Just telling you guys it's worked. But it is challenging sometimes. There are customers that plug in and they just, don't dare to talk to us.
Right.
So I think that's like a point that I would love to find a way to improve. I would say for years we have improved. So we were talking about my teams use loop videos. They don't want to get on a call with us. Yep. We're just going to embed a loop video and I'm going to start talking to you about what you can do. That's helped the most so far, but I would love to hear if anybody has come across this and how they solve for engagement those not worried.
That's your yeah.
Your point, like the city here approach. So we had a managed onboarding process on a plug and play. So it was 35 to 48 onboarding experience for an customer. We found it wasn't necessarily churn because they hadn't completely activated this software yet. So we had pre-launch basically. And that was ultimately hurting our ability to recognize revenue.
Sure.
So we implemented an implementation fee. We told the customer that if they hit certain criteria along the experience, we would either refund them or apply that to their invoice. And so about that audit, so this conversation is around like getting executives involved in the process. I think onboarding is also getting customers involved in the process. So we kind of incentivized that behavior. We found what we expected was that customers were going to be onboarded at a higher rate, but at the same time period. Instead, we actually found we're able to shorten the onboarding time, so our time to value, or time to recognize revenue shortened. And in these cases where a customer did complete the onboarding experience, we made back some of our CAC because they so it wasn't a full, I mean, it fixed the pretty much cancellation process for that number was pretty high. And it protected a little bit of our CAC, but we ended up losing on pretty much churn, which helps a tremendous amount. So like it sounds counterintuitive to target customer for implementation. We position it as a tool to basically get that blunt process becomes effective.
Do you have a pricing model that's usage based, or what kind of?
It was live the flat subscription.
Oh, okay.
So our pricing, like we were anywhere from 500 to 700 a month. So we priced our implementation fee. Our sales team was able to use it also as a closing tactic. So we priced our implementation fee to be upwards of $1,500, and we brought that down to $500, depending on the organization. And then there were certain scenarios where we sold anywhere from like one license per one. It was a flat rate, but we would have SMBs at enterprise size organizations. And so that created complexity here. We do a lot of effort in the healthcare space to provide practice. And so we would up the implementation fee. And our customers didn't bat an eye on it because the pricing was such that, like, oh, this makes sense, I can get this back to like the X, Y, and Z. If they're going to purchase something at the point of sale, they're mentally thinking that it's going to be all the problem process of 5 foot. So that's, I mean, for us again, it was a longer onboarding process. So I think that's part of the reason why it worked. But I know a lot of organizations today have that 7-day onboarding process where you get some information before you actually get on running, and that's something for us.
I made a blanket statement too earlier of 100% onboarding a vanity metric, and it's what we worked at really towards Sprout was how do you give, because we're talking about adults and human learning and psychology, and everyone learns a little bit differently. So changes, yeah. So you could have the best built out one-to-one human onboarding program, but your recipient might not learn that way or might not care to get on a call with you, right? So part of what we were really working towards and how we actually addressed getting to that 100% was multiple pathways. So we had one-to-one human-led, we had the one-to-many in partnership with marketing and strategic webinars, both on-demand and live ones, and then really in-app guidance and product tours. So we were using and LMS systems, and we were using Pendo and Intercom and all sorts of things in the app. But all those pathways were driving customers towards the same or similar activation moments so that folks can learn and jump between those pathways ultimately too upon their own styles and needs.
If it was an enterprise customer, they would ask us what kind of implementation or onboarding program do we have for larger clients, and we offer an employee onboarding software. We don't have an onboarding plan for customers. So
I know.
Each your own dog food scenario.
Yeah, the cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Yeah.
Or whatever it's called.
So because it's not cookie cutter. Every customer has their own needs, and we just recently closed a customer, and they were asking us, "Can you share what's the onboarding plan? How do you like?" Blank, we don't know. It depends on the client's needs and looking at needs. So how do you fix that?
So we sell onboarding software, right? But what we do ourselves and a lot of our customers do is they show the onboarding plan that which cloud is. So there will be a thing you work on, and they actually show it in the sales process because it builds trust. And a lot of times you're like, great, I'm going to spend 20 grand or 30 grand in your software. You're just telling me I'm going to get this great outcome. How are we going to get there? And kind of giving them that roadmap, the runway. Here's how we're going to get there. Here's the work you're going to do, and if you're not ready to do this work, let's wait. But showing that in the sales process and having something to show, because you have a process, whether or not it's defined, it's now like putting it into a system.
Regardless of how you get there.
But it depends on every customer. Even if you have a smaller customer, they might take like 6 months to implement.
Yeah.
But if they're more motivated to, I guess the cashback would actually work.
Yeah, the sticking carrot idea, right? Yeah.
We've also had some success along the lines of what she was talking about, where just like this is sort of magic, but like redefining what onboarding is. So we work in a service industry, which takes a really long time to collect all the information from a client. And ideally, you want to be collecting your recurring revenue on day one when they sign. But there's a strong argument that the client can have that there's no reason for me to pay you. You don't have enough information to be doing what you're saying you're going to do for me. So we separated the internal technical onboarding from a partnership launch process.
Yeah.
And partnership launch takes 7 days.
Right.
So after 7 days, we're going. But then you have this whole extended process in the background, which quite frankly, you can be doing and providing service at the same time. So just like changing the viewpoint on it was helpful for us in that way.
Yeah. A lot of it's how you communicate it, right? Because ultimately your customers don't and nor should they care about what you're doing or not doing behind the scenes, right? They want to know what to do and how to go do it. And that's our job to give them those steps. So you can, to your kind of point, you can devalue the process by making it, especially if you're marketing it and selling it as this is going to be fast and change your life overnight. And now I'm stuck in this 90-day implementation, data transferring hole.
If you sell them the dream and then it's like, oh, let's slow way down and pull out everybody's teeth, it's going to be really hard. So to be able to deliver on that dream and then do the hard work in the background is important.
And I think that we're actually going to go deeper into these discussions, right? So let's go ahead and switch gears here